Welcome back from that break. Let's now transition into a talk about aspects including government's commitment towards social protection financing. Just a preamble before I introduce my guest about what exactly this is. The progress, especially in terms of reducing poverty at national level, has been wide-ranging. Of course, those initiatives are led by government, but the incidence of poverty has more than halved from 56% in 1992 to 25.5% in 2010 and 19.7% in 2022. That's a result of the many programs of social protection that are being rolled out. Here to help us understand what exactly social protection is and what is being done on that particular front is Professor Paul Bukuluchi, who is a researcher at Makerere University, Department of Social Works and Social Administration. A very warm welcome to the program, Professor.
Thank you very much.
What is social protection, and in this particular stead, is it working for the Ugandan?
Thank you. Good morning, our viewers, and thank you, NTV, for hosting me.
We're honored.
Yeah. And my name is Paul Bukuluchi. I'm a professor at Makerere University in the Department of Social Work and Social Administration in the School of Social Sciences. And it is long, but we say also College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Okay. I'm very honored to be here.
You're welcome.
Social protection is a critical issue, especially that you mentioned about poverty. I know that there has been some improvements in terms of reducing the number of people below the poverty line. Sometimes it even halved, but we also must take into account the recent occurrences, especially COVID-19 and its impact on livelihoods, and also the current recession, economic recession due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, and the impact it is having on prices. So some of these gains might actually be reversing as a result of the current global trends, the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic recession. So vulnerability, risk and vulnerability among the population is real. And we have to, especially you can talk of the urban poor, but also people living in rural areas. So social protection basically contributes to addressing risk and vulnerability. It has a number of functions. It has the function of prevention. That means that you caution people not to follow in the poverty line.
That's right.
Or to have to make sure they have the basics and things to eat. It has a protection function, but it also has what we call a transformative function. Transformative in a way that if there are barriers at the individual, community, societal level, whether this is about unfair laws or unfair social and cultural norms, then you engage in transforming those in order to make it easier for people to live a life of dignity.
That's right. So what are the fundamental pillars of social protection?
So social protection, the pillars basically two. We have the social security pillar and then the social care and support pillar. Okay. Basically, the social security pillar is about mitigating people from getting into risk and vulnerability, and most of that is through the direct income support. Then there is the social insurance where you contribute, so that is contributing.
Could you give specific examples for the average Ugandan to understand exactly where we are?
Okay, so some of the examples of social protection programs are like the public service pension scheme. Okay. Because it is tax funded and it cushions you upon retirement.
That's right.
Then there is the National Social Security Fund, and which was focusing more on people working in the private sector, in the formal private sector.
That's
but
right.
Now, due to the amendment in 2022, it has been extended to the informal sector.
The informal sector.
Then, but social protection is, and there are many others, but there are also what we call the direct income support programs like SAGE. I think SAGE is well known. That is targeting our older
It's well
persons.
known for the figure.
For the figure. Okay, and it is targeting our older persons.
That's right.
They are also disability-focused social protection programs, including the disability grants that are run by the Ministry of Gender. Sometimes these confuse. They are like livelihood programs rather than social
I'll be coming to the disability issue just a little bit later. Allow me to delve on risk and vulnerability and bring in the aspect of gender sensitivity when rolling out social protection programs. How are we ensuring that those that are most vulnerable actually receive this kind of protection?
So normally what happens is that for each program there is a criteria that is set, and generally risk and vulnerability is assessed according to a number of criteria that include several indicators that they look at. For example, you can look at the number of dependents, you can look at the level of poverty, you look at the level of education, you can look at the skills. Sometimes it also involves looking at internal displacement and disaster-prone people. So those criteria are important, but you pointed to the issue of gender sensitivity in our social protection programs. It is, I think, always important to first explain what we mean by gender. Gender here means we look at the relationships between men and women and how they are socially constructed in society. That's right. How they are regulated by the social and gender norms in a given society. For example, they regulate who has the power to make decisions. Is it the man or woman, or is it shared? They regulate access to and control of resources between men and women, who has that power relative to the other. They also regulate who does what in terms of gender roles, and when it comes to gender roles and division of labor, who spends more time in paid employment or paid work, and who spends more time on the unpaid work, especially the unpaid care work and voluntary activities. And we see that it is skewed towards women doing most of this of the unpaid care work, and men being engaged more in the care work. And all these increase risk and vulnerability for the gender, and in this case women and girls, for which they experience time poverty, and the power dynamics dictate that men have that privilege to make most of the decisions, and this increases the risk. So for example, if there is time poverty, it means that women are not going to be engaging in paid work, and that increases their poverty levels.
Talking about increasing vulnerability, for example, if people, one is already a woman, but disabled. Just the other day, the Uganda Debt Network released a report, of course working alongside UNICEF, the International Labour Organization, and the European Union, about inclusive social protection systems that look at the disabled. I don't know whether you've been able to dig into it.
Yes.
What exactly does it bring to the fore?
So disability is an extremely important concept, but first of all, let me go back to your question. What if I'm a woman, but I also have a disability, or I'm a man, but I also have a disability? This brings to core the fact that we should avoid being simplistic of looking at men and women in terms of body politics. Somebody in a female body, somebody in a male body, and take into account that whole baggage that comes with the social construction of an ideal woman, the social construction of an ideal man, and how that influences the way we do policy and legislation, and we can allocate resources to address risk and vulnerability. But going back to that, gender is only one social identity, but there are multiple social identities. So I could have one social identity as a woman, and my social construction as a woman, which is relative from one society to another, which could put me at risk in terms of power relations, access and control over resources, in terms of having voice for decision making, and in terms of having a high burden of unpaid care work. Care work is such a huge thing. Then, in addition to that, I have a disability. That is another social identity. But that is not the only social identity. There could be also that I'm illiterate, or it could be that I'm of low socioeconomic class. So we always have to get away from this trap of only thinking about gender in terms of men and women. So what most of the social protection programs do is to say, oh, we have this threshold. 50% of the women are benefiting from the program and 50% of the men. And we are gender sensitive. No, that is only a starting point.
In light of what appears to be misrepresentations, misunderstandings, and the folly of making decisions because of thinking like that. Yeah. What are the specific recommendations you as a scholar, a researcher, and all the other stakeholders have come up with?
Yeah, and I'm going to that right away, but just to emphasize your point on disability. So disability is also oversimplified. Disability is a complex term. There are different types of disability, and they differ in terms of severity of disability. That's right. So and most social protection programs just do a tick. Disability, yes, no. Yet disability is complex and has several, and some people have multiple severe disabilities. That's right. And we don't have a child disability grant, for example, and yet disabilities are growing among the children. We don't have a regular cash transfer like that of SAGE to people with multiple and severe disability, and these are huge challenges. Now the recommendations. So one of the recommendations is to make sure that we focus on gender-sensitive social protection by making sure that we go beyond the numbers. 30% of men, 70% of women, and take into account issues around gender roles or division of labor, the power relation dynamics between men and women, the differences in access to and control over resources, but also take into account the fact that some people, women are not homogeneous, they are heterogeneous. As you said, I could be a woman, but of low socioeconomic class, I have a disability, I have 8 children, I'm not the same like any other woman. So we need to take this complexity into account. 2, disability is extremely important, so we need to build the capacity even to assess disability. The capacity to diagnose and assess different types of disability is low. But one important thing I want also to mention is that the investment in social protection in Uganda is extremely low. In the region, we are the lowest investors in social protection compared to Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and South Africa. So we invest only 0.7% of GDP, yet other countries like South Africa investing 5%, Kenya around 2%. Yeah.
Professor Paul Bukuluchi, many thanks for the perspective on social protection. It's a conversation that we would love to continue any other time. I'll be glad to host you again.
Thank you very much.
That will do it. That's Professor Paul Bukuluchi, a researcher at Makerere University's Social Work and Social Administration Department.